Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. I've been haunted the last few days by a little bit of a mystery. How is it that the daily death numbers from COVID have topped 1,000? And how are we seeing this level of devastation and death with the virus, despite just over 60% of the eligible population fully vaccinated and 81% of seniors who are fully vaccinated? Seniors, of course, being the most vulnerable to the virus, making up a huge portion of the deaths from COVID we've seen up until now. How are we in this situation? And I came across this New York Times article, which helped make sense of things for me. It says the U.S. has a far higher share of seniors without full vaccine protection than many other wealthy countries, a key risk factor driving serious COVID illness and death. And those seniors are concentrated in certain places such that national averages actually mask the high rate of older Americans in broad swaths of the country, like you see in the red there on the map, who remain deeply vulnerable. So why is that? Why are we an outlier compared to other wealthy countries that have the privilege of having lots of vaccine to distribute, where we have big chunks of our seniors who are not vaccinated? And the reason for this, at least one main reason I suspect, is this: the American right here in the U.S. has been more hostile to public health measures across the board than peer countries almost since COVID first came ashore. I mean, you saw it from the beginning of the pandemic, right? This kind of alternate reality that's been constructed. And the central ordering principle of that reality was that, and is that, COVID is actually not that big a deal. That's it. That's the central premise, that people are lying to you about its severity, and they're lying to you about how to solve it. This has been their kind of guiding North Star principle. And all these different behaviors and beliefs, some of them bizarre, many of them downright dangerous, have gotten people sick and killed, frankly. They all flow from that. Stuff like, I don't want to wear a mask, or I don't want to, avoid crowded indoor spaces, or I don't want to get a vaccine. But the more bizarre manifestations of that have been this search, a really strange thing that's been unfolding now for a year and a half. This search for some hidden miracle cure that the people in charge, the experts, the FDA, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who are trying to control you with their tyrannical public health orders, they won't tell you about. Because if you knew about this secret cure I have here in my back pocket, then you would realize it's not that big of a deal. And hence, you would be free from their tyranny and mind control. And that has led to fringe enthusiasm for some untested and unproven treatments. Now, granted, sometimes that enthusiasm is based on some early promising data. I mean, this is all a complicated, fast unspooling pandemic. People are figuring things out, scientists among them. But then it has been taken upon all sorts of rational calculus and turned into a kind of weird COVID cargo cult. We saw this first with the anti-malarial drug. Remember that one? Hydroxychloroquine. Now, there were some early promising studies about hydroxychloroquine, but then Donald Trump and a lot of other conservatives became obsessed with it, like in a Freudian neurotic compulsive way, obsessed. Fox News' Laura Ingraham would bring on her doctors that she dubbed her medicine cabinet to talk about the drug.
Dr. Smith, you pointed out that not a single patient of yours, COVID patient, that has been on the hydroxy regimen has had to be intubated. It's a game changer, correct?
It's a game changer. It's absolute game changer. Laura, I think this is the beginning of the end of the pandemic. I'm very serious.
Oh, wow. This is unbelievable. Well, Dr. Smith, all the naysayers and the people dismissing this, just wait. Okay, the good news is coming.
Well, that was April of 2020. Now, to her credit, Laura Ingraham called that pronouncement unbelievable, and she was correct. It was not to be believed. A couple days later, Laura Ingraham met with Trump at the White House to personally pitch him on hydroxychloroquine, and Trump was sold. So much so that a little over 2 weeks later, Dr. Rick Bright, a Health and Human Services official who helped oversee COVID vaccine development, said he was ousted from his role after his objections to the anti-malaria drug as a treatment for COVID. And then, in June of 2020, the FDA said they no longer had reason to believe the drug was effective against COVID. And after all that, I mean, that embarrassing episode, I mean, imagine going on television night after night, promoting this crank cure that turns out not to work, telling people that it's right around the corner, the good news is coming, and then just being flatly, horrifyingly wrong while people die by the thousand. Imagine that. After all that, there was still this faith. There had to be a secret cure. Where is it? And of course, this is what animated one of the most infamous moments of Trump's presidency.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number in the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that.
That is still as shocking a year later, I have to say. Yes, the famous shine a light in your orifices or inject bleach moment. And after that insane moment, Trump began looking for another silver bullet, which he found in monoclonal antibodies, or Regeneron. That's the company that makes it, and which can be somewhat effective according to the data we have. There's some data to support this is actually an effective treatment. Now, Trump got it after he contracted COVID and called it, quote, a cure. It's not. He said that everyone would have free access to it. They, of course, did not. But Trump's older and not necessarily sturdiest of friends, they got Regeneron when they came down with the virus. And yet, despite the drug's own website saying that it's an unproved investigational therapy and there are limited clinical data available, Regeneron has retained its good graces in the conservative movement to the point where Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, whose state reported a record-breaking 26,203 COVID cases today, who instead of doing everything possible to try to get people vaccinated, which is one thing you could do if you're governor, is out there setting up free monoclonal antibody treatment sites that require 2 injections in the stomach and 1 in each arm. And now, despite having safe and effective vaccines that, according to the data we have day by day, we're getting more data every day, continue to provide tremendous protection against hospitalization, severe illness, and death, even if those vaccines have not shut down transmission in the way that we initially hoped, despite the fact we have that, we have now arrived at perhaps the most gothic chapter of this story, which is people taking livestock dewormer to treat COVID. Yes, the stuff used to treat parasites in animals. Again, why? It flows from the same conviction, right? This guiding principle from the beginning. There has to be a miracle cure they are not telling you about. Everything works backwards off of that. I mean, Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin was ahead of the curve on this one, I got to say. He hosted a COVID hearing this past December with 2 doctors pushing for the use of the dewormer drug ivermectin.
It seems like a no-brainer that you should try it. And here's the thing about ivermectin, going back to ivermectin, because you know that is my message today, that it is the cure for this cancer.
Yeah, by the way, you support ivermectin, right?
Of course. You're not confused about that, right, Senator? So you have to understand something about ivermectin. 3.7 billion doses have been administered since it was first developed in 1987. 3.7 billion. Something like over 60% of sub-Saharan Africa takes it on a yearly basis. It has an unparalleled safety profile with almost no side effects. The only side effects that have been attributed to it are those that are considered to be part of the diseases they treat, which is the ridding of the parasites. And so given the mountain of evidence that I've presented, as well as the safety profile on a risk-benefit therapeutic analysis, you cannot come up with a credible argument to not give it.
Okay, well, let me just try. It's not been proven safe and effective. It is true that there are people that take it around the world. It's true that there's even a published study or two that shows it suggests it might maybe do something for humans. But there's a process to okay drugs for a reason. And more than 8 months later, we've got farm supply stores that are running out of ivermectin. And this is happening in large parts of the country that are seeing a significant increase in COVID cases. In one county in northwest Arkansas, the jail's physician is giving it to inmates. Yesterday, it came up during a finance and budget committee hearing in that county.
I learned today that Dr. Karras is giving ivermectin cow dewormer to inmates at the jail. He said, I'm taking ivermectin. He has members of his family on ivermectin. He is disregarding FDA guidance and giving dewormer to our inmates at the jail. And at a time when the world is laughing at us for people taking cow dewormer, I think we need to reevaluate who we're using.
In Texas, Poison Control says they are seeing an increase in calls about exposure to the livestock dewormer ivermectin. In Georgia, the director of their poison center has had enough.
When you see a picture of a cow or a horse or a sheep, it's amazing to me that people would rather, trust what they might have read on the internet as opposed to, learning more about, just how effective the vaccines are.
This is where the madness has gotten us. People raiding the shelves of farm supply stores looking for livestock dewormer containing an anti-parasitic drug because they have been told it cures COVID, and the bad public health experts don't want you to know it. They're covering it up. But that's just that's a different side of the same coin of the fact that we have millions of seniors in America who haven't been vaccinated, and now thousands dying from a disease they don't have to die from because they have not been vaccinated, because they have been told from the beginning by people like Laura Ingraham that there's some miracle cure for COVID, or it's actually not that big a deal.